Let's kick it off, everybody. I think it's 3 minutes over the 7:30, the starting time. I want to be mindful of you for connecting on time to this call. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here. My name is Enrique Rubio. I am the founder of Hacking HR. Very excited to be putting together this conversation to talk about one topic that I think it's in everybody's minds these days, the topic of resilience. And I have interviewed around 100 plus people for the Hacking HR podcast over the past around 1 month or a month and a half. And there are maybe two or three things that are common among all of them, things that they think we should be talking about. And that's resilience is one of them. So I wanted to put this conversation together to help us understand how resilience looks like in the workplace, how to build resilience for our people, for our employees, for ourselves as well, of course, and for our organizations. So this conversation is unscripted, if you will. There's no rehearsed questions here. We're going to have a very human, laid back conversation. And if you have any question, please feel free to post that on the chat. I'm going to try to ask the questions to the panelists, and a little later, as we get to the end of the panel, hopefully, if you have any questions that you want to ask directly to them, I'm going to unmute you, and you can do that. So let's do to begin with a quick round of introductions, so that everybody of the participants know who you guys are. So Tammy, why don't we kick off with you?
Starting with me. So I'm Tammy Rosen. I've been a chief people officer at some of Fortune 100 companies and startups, and have always focused on the health and welfare of our employees, and looking at ways in which employees can come to work and encumbered to do their best work. So really focused on diversity, inclusion, on resiliency, on the mental and also physical health of our employees at major companies, from small to huge companies.
Awesome, Tammy. Thank you so much for joining the panel so early in the morning for you too.
With no coffee or tea, so.
Thank you so much. Rachel?
Yeah, I'm Rachel Druckenmiller, and I am the founder and CEO of an organization called Unmuted. And the focus of my work is working with organizations and their leaders and teams to help them to be more resilient and connected and compassionate. And my background is 13 years in the well-being industry. I was recognized in 2015 as the #1 health promotion professional in the country, and I've had the opportunity to influence the industry and have kind of, as all of us do, my own personal journey with resilience that informs my work. And I'm really grateful to be doing such purposeful work on something that a lot of people really need support on right now. So it's great to be here with everyone.
Thank you, Rachel. Colin?
Hi, I am Colin Minster. I'm the Chief People Officer at Human Rights Watch. And our organization investigates and reports on all kinds of human rights abuses happening in the world. We're about 500 people in 70 countries. And so our work is very challenging, very important. And stress and resilience is a major part of sort of how we sustain our staff to continue the difficult and courageous work that they do each and every day. And so I want to thank Enrique for the opportunity, my fellow panelists for joining us, and looking forward to a really productive conversation to share some of the things that we're doing to build resilience.
Awesome. Thank you, Colin. And well, thank you, Colin, Rachel, Tammy, for joining. Once again, everybody, thank you for being here. And let's just kick off the conversation. I want to ask you, very often resilience, if you put it together with other concepts such as mindfulness and empathy, for some people they seem like something fluffy, right? That's something that is difficult to pinpoint. Like, what does it look like? What how do we know that we're resilient? How do we know that our organization is resilient and whatnot? So let me ask you this. When you think about resiliency at work, in the workplace, what does it mean? How does an organization that is resilient really look like? And this is an open question for anybody who wants to jump in.
All right, I guess I'll start.
Go
So in
ahead,
an organization,
go
I mean,
ahead.
when we think about resilience is a capacity. So first of all, we think it's like a lot of people look at resilience and say it's either I have it or I don't have it. And it's really no, it's like a muscle that we can build up and it's something that we can strengthen over time. So I look at resilience as a capacity that can be developed over time. And it's really rooted in this ability to bounce back from adversity. That's the most kind of common way of thinking about it. But I really think it's more than that. And then it's ability to adapt. It's an ability to be curious, to be responsive, to be a word that we hear a lot, to be agile, and to be open to the lessons in adversity and difficulty and making meaning out of them so that we're stronger and wiser moving forward. So in terms of thinking kind of globally about it, I guess just to kick off the conversation, those are some initial thoughts that come up for me about what resilience is. It's this capacity to really draw on these strengths inside of ourselves and outside of ourselves that help us to be stronger and wiser mentally, physically, emotionally, relationally.
Fantastic. Tammy, do you want to add something?
Sure. I was going to say I totally agree with Rachel's comments, and I would just add it's really playing the long game, and it's being able to not be thinking about this as a sprint, but more of a marathon, and realizing and being introspective for yourself and your teams about what you're doing and how you're working, and is that actually causing more stress or frustration or making people work harder than they need to with unnecessary busy work. And the challenge for us today is that we no longer can be just focused on what happens during the hours of work. And I say the hours of work versus the places in which we work, because now the places are in everybody's homes, and everybody's homes are kind of also have their own stresses and their own things that kind of pull against people's ability to be resilient. And we as employers need to now think about both the family and the home life and make sure that we offer the opportunities for people to get that time to recharge, to have the moments where they can have breaks and they're not on 10 hours of Zoom every day, because that is exhausting mentally and physically. And the fact that they're not getting as much physical exercise because they're not getting a commute, or they're not having their normal routines like they used to, and work and life are blending. So I think it's more than just, it is the long game. It is about thinking through not only their work, but their personal life too, and making sure that as employers and as managers and as colleagues, you're looking out for those signs where people might not be able to sustain the level of intensity that they are.
Fantastic. Colin, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I think all that's amazing. The one thing that we have to recognize is that things just don't always go the way we want them. I think 2020 has taught us that. And so resilience means something different for everyone. And it's about how you improvise when something that you've mapped out, thought of, planned, invested in doesn't go you want it, when relationships don't go the way you had intended, or your best of intentions aren't received in the spirit in which you'd hope that they'd be delivered. And it's about how you improvise, how you pivot. I heard someone talk before about agility. It's about those coping mechanisms that allow you to adjust without giving up, or adjust without that being a traumatic experience. And that's something, that's a skill that can be developed for both individuals and teams. And it's a key ingredient to success in life and work.
Absolutely. So now it seems that there's a connecting idea here, which is resilience as a capacity, as a skill that we develop when we think in the long term, is like a muscle that we have to train. But just like the physical body that you train through training, you have a training, right? You have some things that you gotta do, the muscles that you gotta work on, the routines that you gotta go through in order to develop and strengthen those muscles. So when you think about resilience, how do we build that muscle? How do we strengthen that muscle in the workplace? What do we have to do to build resiliency in the workplace for individuals and for the organization as an entity as a whole?
Well, I'll jump in. I think the first thing is awareness. similar to what Colin was saying, every resilience is different for each person. So you have to show and teach different types of ways in which people can find their own resilience as individuals in the workplace. And then as teams, you need to work together to figure out what you need. And I would say the big thing here is teaching people to ask for help, and also ask and teach people to say when they've hit a limit. Because I think that's two things that I find that a lot of people feel very reluctant to share in the workplace because they think it shows weakness. And in fact, I disagree. I think it shows strength because it shows that you can leverage your team and others to help you when you need it. And then when they need it, you can help them back. And it makes the team a lot more strong and resilient. So in general, I think it's really, first of all, awareness, then it's really sharing, where you need help, giving people tools and resources and information to educate themselves, and then also putting in place programs that keep people reminding of how to stay resilient for themselves and find their own resiliency.
Excellent. Anybody wants to add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say, that there are going to be moments when you fail or you don't do, as well as you had expected. And so, one of the great things about working on teams is that there are people who can be, your compass or your sense of support. And so find people who are invested in your success and cultivate, relationships so that there are people who can hold you up when you fall. And the second thing is, to be okay with not doing your best, because we're all human, and there are moments when we're really delivering at high levels, and there are moments that we're not. And the thing about resilience is not honing in on all of the things that went wrong, but what you can do and hone in on for next time to deliver a better result. And then the last thing I'll say is, I'm not very good at this myself, but I do think it's important to make sure that you've got, you disconnect from work so that you are resetting at home, with your family or with your friends, and that you bring your best self to work. So, those are the three things that I would add.
Excellent.
Yeah. I mean, I'm on board with kind of to add to, I feel like we're just kind of all building on each other, which is the way these things work ideally. One of the things that I think organizations can very practically do, and that we can practically do as individuals, that is one of the most powerful things that organizations can just start to do as a regular thing, is to share stories of resilience, of individual resilience within the organization. Hey, tell us a story about a time, turn to a neighbor, or if you're in a group like this, for people in a breakout room, have a conversation about, tell us about a time where you went through a really difficult circumstance and you weren't sure how you were going to come out of that, and you did anyway. You overcame it. What can you appreciate about yourself? What did you learn from that experience? What strengths showed up? What can you notice about how you showed up in that moment that you could carry into this moment? So getting people to share stories are the most powerful ways to connect humans in general, regardless of what their role is. Stories are one of the greatest equalizers that we have. And they're a way that we can connect with each other as humans, and to get beyond what somebody's role is, beyond what somebody's title is. When we start to share these stories of times where we've overcome difficult things, it's a connector, because we start to realize that nobody gets out of this world unscathed. There is nobody that is an adult right now that has had a completely carefree life and never had anything happen that was difficult. Like, it is just not, you cannot get through, especially 2020. There's nobody, who's gotten through 2020 and saying, my life has not changed in any way at all. But when we start to share those stories as individuals and as an organization, to say, hey, let's reflect on a time when, as an organization, we went through something challenging and we came out of it on the other side, and we were stronger and better together. What can we appreciate about that time? How did we show up? What did we do? How do we respond? So I believe that when we tell stories are ways that we can make meaning of things, and humans are meaning-making machines. And so when we have the opportunity to be invited into telling and sharing stories, that is one of the things that can help connect us and help us, appreciate the best of the past and look forward to the future with hope.
That is fantastic. And one of the things that despite all these circumstances that we're going through, which is a tragedy, and I don't think anybody would ever wish for change to come in such a harsh way, like, because of coronavirus. But one of the gifts of this tragedy is the fact that either intentionally or just by chance, leaders are sharing a lot of stories of their own selves at home, working from home. And I always share the same story of this guy, CEO of a company, the only place in his house where he was able to connect freely for his calls, the town hall meetings, was the bathroom, because there were, the kids were running around, the pets were running around. And so he was connected from the bathroom, but he didn't want anybody to know that he was from the bathroom. So he was using this virtual background. And the CHRO told him, don't use the virtual background. Just tell everybody that you are connecting from the bathroom, because you're not the only one who is going through the same thing. If you model that vulnerability and you tell everybody, the only place in my house that I can connect from is the bathroom, the others that maybe are holding back to sharing the same thing will end up sharing it, because they are empowered by you. And that simple, like you're saying, Rachel, that simple, unintentional story shared with the company created a different environment with more psychological safety and more vulnerability, if you will. So I want to ask you this question, but before that, I want to once again acknowledge everybody here. Thank you so much. And if you guys have any question, please post it in the chat. I'll try to bring that to the panelists. This is not a story; it's a reality. We, over the past 7 months, we've gone through all this tragedy of coronavirus, and people are getting fed up, right, with not seeing their friends, not seeing their family, not bring their kids to school and whatnot. But the reality is that this is going to be taking a long time to fix. We know that even with the best of the governments, this would have taken time to fix. So how can we tell people that we have to be resilient, because what we're going through will not come to an end anytime soon? And I'm asking you this question because I think there's a false expectation out there that as soon as we have a vaccine, then we can all go out to party to the bars, right? And that's not real. That's not going to happen. Most experts say that we're going to be in a situation like this for the next year and a half. So how do you convey this message of difficulty, but that at the same time tells people or motivates them to understand that they got to be resilient, because, well, this crisis will continue for some time?
That was a very bleak outlook. So
Sorry.
I'm actually trying to be resilient myself and responding. We can't control what we can't control. And, I sort of look at wherever you happen to be in the world, I sort of look at, the information or misinformation and the response or the lack of response to COVID as sort of, being on a project that, people don't seem to be on the same page on. There's lots of different information, or being on a team where people aren't quite coordinated. You can't control what you can't control. And so, look for ways to improve your own skills, look for, some of the positives about, being in a remote space. Most days, for me, it's getting to spend more time with my partner most days. Or it's picking up a new skill or something that you normally don't have time to do. But look for things that give you purpose. Stay disciplined. Keep a regular schedule and make the most of the situation, because you can't control what you can't control.
Thank you for sharing that.
I would jump in, and I think that's right. You can't control what you can't control. But at the same token, find where you can have control, because when you can have predictability, or you could have something that actually grounds you, that gives you the meaning Rachel talked about, and you build around the different stories that you hear and see. I'm struck by, we had done at our company a resiliency week. And during that week, we spent time talking about positivity, mindfulness, sleep, a bunch of other things. And we had all different events, and we had senior leaders join those events and tell a story when they weren't resilient, and then tell a story of how they became resilient, to be more vulnerable. And through some of those stories, there was a lot of, rich information for people to leverage and learn. So I saw in the chat room, how do you get employees to tell stories? I think you just have to start with senior leaders and others, and people posting blogs about where they fell down, or where they had challenges, or where they needed help, and what they did about it. But we had this amazing speaker, you probably have read some of his books, Neil Pasricha, come and speak. And what I loved about what he does every morning is these 3 questions he asks himself. And he answers them in order to start his day in a positive way. And one is, I will let go of. And the second is, I am grateful for. And the third one is, I will focus on. And at first I found that to be a little strange to ask myself those questions, but every morning now that I ask them, they help me to kind of power forward in the day. Another interesting trick someone told me they do is they get on their stationary bike in the morning, and they bike about 30 minutes, and then they get off their bike and they refresh and they go to their desk, and that's their morning commute. And then they end their day with getting back on the stationary bike and doing another 30 minutes. So find those different fun ways that helps you get the start and stop in your day, so you can have that longevity. Ask those questions, I will let go of, I'm grateful for, I will focus on, so that you can ground yourself, and then ask for help, because people around you want to help you.
That's fantastic. Rachel, do you want to add something?
Yeah, really rich discussion here. I mean, I think another thing that's important to acknowledge first and foremost for people is that this is a state of collective global trauma. And so if we don't acknowledge that, people feel like they're kind of crazy when they're having these moments where they feel like they're crying for no reason, or they're being overly reactive, or they snapped at their kid again, or they were impatient with a coworker or a client, and they're like, what's wrong with me? So many people are feeling that right now. They're suffering in silence, feeling like, what is wrong with me? What is wrong with me? Why can't I hold it together? Why can't I cut it? Because this has never happened in our lifetimes. And it hasn't, nothing that even looks remotely like this has really happened in 100 years. And so we have to acknowledge the scale of what's going on, and to let people know, even understanding the grieving process. Part of the grieving process is denial. Part of the grieving process is trying to think about, well, what could I have done to prevent this? And what could I have done differently? Part of it is anger. Part of it is sadness. So for so much, I mean, I've been teaching dozens of resilience workshops in the past 7 months. And one of the main things people find the most value from is to just have permission to feel. There's a really great book by Mark Brackett called Permission to Feel. He's out of the Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence. And just acknowledging to people, hey, if you are feeling any of these things, angry, sad, scared, frustrated, disappointed, happy, joyful, hopeful, if you're feeling any of those things, those are all on the spectrum of a normal human experience. There's nothing wrong with you. So first and foremost, show yourself compassion. So part of this is being able to show ourselves and other people compassion, because everybody, I like to say that everybody is walking around with an invisible backpack carrying stuff, and you can't see what's in it. And so if we enter into every conversation with that recognition of everyone is dealing with something, everyone is carrying something, how can I show a bit more grace? How can I show a bit more compassion? How can I be curious instead of judgmental? I think as individuals, if each person was committed to doing that we would have a much better world and a much better ability to respond to what's going on. And the other thing I want to mention too is, just jotted down a note, is there's something that's a bit different from resilience that is called post-traumatic growth. And post-traumatic growth happens after we're going through a situation of adversity or struggle, and we don't necessarily feel like we've bounced back. It takes time. It's something that we feel like we're maybe struggling through, but we can have a positive response to it by doing things practically, like thinking to yourself, over the past 7 months, what type of greater appreciation for life do I have? How have any of my relationships changed for the better? What's possible now that wasn't possible then? Like having this conversation, we wouldn't be together if this weren't going on right now. What personal strengths in myself can I appreciate and acknowledge? And how have maybe I experienced some type of spiritual growth? How am I more deeply connected to a sense of meaning and purpose in the world? And so by creating those opportunities for people to really reflect on that, think about that, and share those stories. I'll mention just quickly the question that Jill had asked, also putting people together in Zoom breakout rooms and putting them in small groups, or even as a pair. Have people share as pairs or as groups of 3 and open up the conversation that way. It's easier than doing something where you have 50 people and you ask people to just openly share a story. So
yeah, no, that's one thing that I'm not doing today, but I've been doing with some of the events that we've been putting together is bringing people in smaller groups to some sort of a group therapy, but also sharing some ideas of how they're coping, what they're doing, how they are getting their organizations ready and whatnot. We got a few minutes left, everybody, and I want to make sure that that we bring some of your questions. So if you have any question, please post it in the chat. Happy to bring that question to the panel. So looking forward, right? And I'm sorry, Colin, before I was a little bleak about my forecast of the future. It's just that I think it's great to tell ourselves the story of, we're going to get out of this, and we are going to get out of this. I just don't think the timeline that some people are creating in their minds is a real timeline. And I don't want him to crash against a wall 2 months down the road thinking COVID is gone. It's not gone. It's not going to be gone in, actually ever, but, we're going to be able to, provide some ways to live, even when, things may be looking so difficult out there. But, going forward, what would you say, people are building their own resilience by learning, building the muscle, telling stories and whatnot. What do you think should be the journey of any individual person to build resilience for themselves? What should they start? What could you tell them to do? Number 1, number 2, maybe a couple of steps that they can start practicing right after this call. Not, I always say the same thing, not tomorrow, not next week, but right after this call. A couple of things that they can do.
I'd say reflect on, looking back at how far we've come in this moment of uncertainty. There's been a lot of pain and trauma, not just COVID, just 2020 has brought us all kinds of stressors and angst, and we've survived, and not everyone can say that, and so having an attitude of appreciation for how far we've come, the things we didn't realize we'd get through, but we did because we had a made-up mind to persevere and to press on. And then the second thing I'd say is, Rudyard Kipling, in the poem If, talks about, making the most of the unforgiving minute. So I'd make a list of the things you really like to do. And if you can't go a lot of places, what new spaces can you thrive in? And do some goal setting and planning around newness. Because even though, we're restricted, we're not restricted from growing.
Yeah.
And we're not restricted from self-improvement and bettering ourselves in our situations. So those would be the 3 things that I would mention.
Thank you, Colin. Thank you for sharing that. Rachel, you want to go next? A couple of things that people can start doing right now to build resilience.
Yeah, I'm really big on practical, actionable. One is to really, first of all, understand how your brain works. So recognize that when you're in a state of fear, anxiety, frustration, you can't make logical decisions to get through difficult things. So just helping people understand that a deep breath, I do a practice called 4-7-8 breathing, where you breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale with a whooshing sound like you're blowing out 100 candles on a birthday cake for a count of 8. So it's 4, 7, 8. And when you do that, several sequences of that, what that does is it brings your thinking brain back online, which goes offline when you're in a state of anxiety. So we have to, first of all, teach people to understand how their brain works. So when they're feeling so frustrated, why can't I figure this out? Because you literally do not have the cognitive capacity when you are in that state. So I think first and foremost, helping people understand like the neuroscience in a very simple and accessible way is important. Another thing that I think is helpful is to help people understand that what we focus on expands. So if the first thing you do when you wake up in the morning is look at the COVID death count or like flip through politics for a half hour, you're probably not going to have a good day. Like, so acknowledging your role in what you are choosing to focus on. Because if you are focusing on everything that is wrong in the world, you're going to find a lot of it. There's lots of rabbit trails you can go down to affirm that belief. You can also choose to say, what is right in the world? What is right in my life? What is right in my job? What is right in my relationships? What is right in my health? And when you focus on the things that are going well, I like to call them bright spots. So every day I track, and I got hit by a car back in May and I ended up with a compression fracture in my back. So like speaking about bouncing back from getting knocked down, like been there, physically done that. And tracking bright spots was really helpful for me. So at the end of the day, any small wins, glimmers of hope, moments of joy, no matter how small, to track those on a daily basis cumulatively so that we can start to retrain the brain to look for what's good instead of being obsessed with what's wrong. And the last thing I'll say is to think about, going back to that post-traumatic growth, is to take a moment to reflect and think about, a time where you've been through something challenging and it seemed like it was only negative. Everything in the situation was negative, and think of what's something unexpectedly positive that came out of that experience that you can appreciate now. Everybody has stories like that, and reconnecting to your own story and grounding yourself in that can help you build hope for the future.
Fantastic. Thank you. Tammy?
Yeah, so I'm going to start with saying, first, be reflective and introspective. And I think it dovetails nicely with what Colin and Rachel are saying. And that's why I love the 3 questions I will let go of, I'm grateful for, and I will focus on, because it does ground you to get rid of those unpleasant thoughts or things that are getting in the way. Get yourself grateful for what you have and what you got through COVID. Like, for me, it was the fact that my teenagers wanted to have dinner with me every night and play games because they had no one else to hang out with. So like, find those moments that were positive out of it. And then what you will focus on so that you can make sure you have achievements and accomplishments during the day. I also think make sure you have a good support network around you, whether it's work, friends, family, neighbors, whatever it may be. Find that support structure. They're really great. For me, it's going to the dog park in the morning and all these new friends that decided to have COVID dogs, and really being able to hang out with them. And then the other thing I would say is, really during this time, we always wish we had time to do stuff. And time is always the commodity we never get back, right? And this is a time where you can't go and do the things you normally could do. So do them at home. So for me, I've always wanted to write. So now I'm writing more. Or maybe I wanted to speak at conferences or do different things that you wanted to do. Now try to find those moments where you can do them, because you actually have more time on your hands because you're not traveling so much. Yeah. And then the final thing I would say is try to help others be happy. So one of the things I did at my company is I actually put out a playlist every so often, like every month or so, with fun tunes, and got people to add to my playlist and to join in and share music that makes them happy or joyful or even sad. And that was a really good way to connect with people.
That is amazing. I thank you so much. I just want to add a couple of things on my own end. One of them is that I think it's always, when you're going through a challenging situation, it's always very difficult to see the gift or the silver lining when you are in the middle of the crisis, because everything around you looks like bad. And, quoting Steve Jobs, he said once, only when you look back is when you can connect the dots. And one thing that has been said here is, just look back at the past 7 months. You're here. Hopefully you're all healthy and safe, and, you've survived. Just look back and think about the things that may have looked very negative back then, and that you overcame and you learned from them and you became better. And I say this because while a number of things these days maybe they are not making a lot of sense for you right now, or maybe you find yourself in a very negative situation, just know that you're going to get out of this, hopefully, and you're going to get out of this better, stronger, more resilient, knowing more stuff. So, things are not easy for anybody right now. So I just wanted to tell you that because they may not make sense right now. Hopefully they will make sense later, a few weeks, months down the road when you look back and you start connecting those dots. And then the second thing, which I want to follow up on something that Tammy said, if you're doing well, if you're feeling well, which I know not everybody's feeling 100% well these days, but there are some people that are have been able to cope differently than others. If you are in the group of people that still are, you're thriving in, these days, just make sure that you're reaching out to others, because not everybody's on the same page. And there are many, many people who are truly suffering because they live alone. They don't have their families around. They don't have anybody at work, to talk to. They were drawing their social energy from work, and they don't even have that anchor now. So make sure that you're reaching out to somebody that you may think could be going through something complicated, difficult these days. Just, send them a text message, a WhatsApp, call them, ask them how they're doing. Just make sure that you are there for them, the same way that you may want to have some other people there for you as well. So everybody, this was time flew by, pretty quickly. We've been, together for 40 minutes. I want to thank once again, Colin, Rachel, and Tammy for sharing their insights, their thoughts with us. Thank you so much for this conversation. I think we may have to do it probably in a mid-November when we go through, for those of you who don't live in the United States, we're going through our election cycle right now. It is a very complicated time for us here. So we may need to talk about this again mid-November and continue doing more group therapy. So thank you so much, guys. Thank you for being here, and thank you everybody for connecting to this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Enrique. Hang in there, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye, Rachel. Thank you, Colin.
Bye.
Tammy,
Thanks.
thank you.
Thanks, everyone.